Hey guys, I'm back with another video, and in this video I'm going to show you how to implement auth with Blazor apps without using identity, without using ASP.NET Core Identity. Okay, so the easiest and quickest way is to just set up with individual account that actually sets up ASP.NET Core Identity with our Blazor apps using EF core stores, of course. So if you don't want to use that, if you want to roll out your own custom auth without using identity, then we are going to do this in this video. Okay, so I'm in my Visual Studio 2022. I'm going to create a new project. So I'll say Blazor auth no identity. No identity. Now for this, I'm going to select .NET 8 authentication type none, because if we choose individual account, it is going to set up ASP.NET Core identity, which we do not want to use in this. Now after this, we have two options. For interactivity, we have none, server, WebAssembly, and auto. So how this auth is going to work with the Blazor Web Apps? For none, that means no interactivity, that means only static SSR, so only server side rendering, statically server side rendered app. So for this, and for server, interactive mode server, for these two, there is a common process. And then when WebAssembly comes into the picture with interactive render mode WebAssembly or interactive render mode auto. Okay, because with auto also we have WebAssembly. So we have a different setup for these two, WebAssembly and auto, and we have a different setup for none and server. So we will have two setups. So the point is I'm going to create two projects. In first one, we can use none and server. So I'll use server. I'll show you. It will be same for none and server. So let's choose server here. Per page component or global component, it does not matter. All the setup, configuration, everything is going to be same for both. Either it is per page or component interactivity or global level interactivity. All right, let's create a project. So our project is here. We can quickly see. So we have program.cs where we have just basic setup. Let me zoom it for you. We have this basic setup, which is create builder, add razor components, add interactive server component. If you have selected interactivity none, then you will not have this line, and you will not have this add interactive server render mode on app.map razor components, and everything else will be same. All right, and in components, if we see, we have this layout, main layout, nav menu for navigation menus, and then we have pages, counter, error, home, weather, the default setup. Let's quickly run it. So it's here, the same basic setup, home, weather, static SSR with stream rendering, home is totally static SSR, and counter is interactive. So you can do this. So this is working just fine. Now we want to add auth to this application. So for this, for Blazor Web Apps, the default and easy and quickest way is to use cookies authentication with this. Okay. So first thing what we do when we are configuring our services, that means before app equals builder.build, this is the section where we are actually configuring our builder. So here we'll say simply builder.services.add authentication. Okay, this is the default. And then to use it, we can just have in our when we are configuring our HTTP request pipeline, we can simply have here app.use authentication, use authentication, and use authorization. Use authorization. Move it to before anti-forgery, and we are good. So this is the default authentication setup without anything extra. So now authentication is in place, but we want to have our cookies authentication. So when we say cookies authentication, we need to add couple of things. We need to configure that. So on this add authentication, we can say dot add cookie. Okay, now with this we will need to tell Blazor or the ASP.NET Core Auth system that what is the default authentication scheme we are going to use. So we are going to have a couple of the constants here, so you could either have those here only, so we could say just const string, let's say auth scheme. The name is up to you, whatever you want you can name it, let's say ap auth, and then we can use this auth scheme to this add authentication. If we check, it says default scheme, so we'll add this default scheme here. Then with add cookie we will actually set the cookie configuration. So here if we see, we have authentication scheme, the default authentication scheme we are going to use with cookie, so we can have this auth scheme here as well. Now we press comma. This is an overload method with this add cookie, where we have this action with cookie authentication options, configure options. We can configure the cookie options here. Okay, so here we'll say options equals, now let's try to configure our cookies. First thing, option dot cookie dot name, so you can name it whatever you want. So let's create a different constant. We'll say auth cookie. Name is up to you, you can name it whatever you want. Let's say, yeah, let's leave it same. So we'll say auth cookie. Now after this we can set a default of other options. So login path, where should it go to for login? If there is any authorized page we are directly trying to access it, it will automatically redirect to this path. Okay, so for this we need to have something. So what we will follow, let's say we are following this slash auth slash login. This is our login path. After that we can have access denied path. If user is trying to access some resource which user is not authorized to, we can have it like this. So we'll say auth and access denied. This is up to you, whatever you want you can name it, and you can create a page. There should be a page with this route. After that we can also add options dot logout path. Now it's up to you if you want to have a separate page or some, let's say API endpoint for this logout. I'm going to use a page, so we'll do this auth slash logout. Okay, now we can add some cookie configurations to make it secure. So here we could say options dot cookie dot HTTP only. Yes, we want it to HTTP only so that client cannot modify it. Then we could have the secure policy. So here we could say cookie secure policy dot, let's say always. Then we have options dot cookie dot same site. So we are just trying to secure the cookie in whatever way possible. We will do this. So same site mode dot strict, so strictly for same site only. Then we can set the expiration of this cookie. For this we can say options dot cookie dot expiration, or maybe let's set direct in options. We have sliding expiration, and we should have expiring time span. So this is how we want our cookie, how long we want our cookie to be valid. So here we could say time span dot, then it's up to us. So expire time span we could say, let's say from days 1. So we are default expiration time for our cookie is 1 day. Okay, this configuration up to you, you can adjust this time span as per your requirement. And after that you can also set sliding of expiration if you want to. So what it will do, when it is before expiring, it will actually renew the cookie and set the expiration time. uh, it will advance the expiration time, so it will not expire automatically. Okay, that's how this sliding expiration works. So true. And with this setup, I guess we are good. So everything is in place now. Cool. Now after this, what we need to have this login page with this URL path. From there, we will use this auth scheme, and with that we will allow our user to log into the system. So for that, for login page, we can directly create those pages in our pages folder, or because these are auth pages, so I would create a folder, but this structure is up to you. I'll say auth, and inside this I'm going to create these three pages: login, logout, access denied. Blazor component, let's say login page, or just login, then access denied, and logout. All right. So login page, we will have our login model. So we can say class login model, and we can have these properties. So this is email, or we could call it username. Then we have password. Then we have this remember me field to make our cookie persistent. All right. So this is our simple login model. Now here we are going to have a property. So we'll say private login model. Let's say model with our get set with a default value of empty model. Okay. Now because how this auth works in Blazor Web Apps, now the login and logout page, or login and register and logout, these three pages, these sets or removes the cookies. And in order to use cookies, we should have access to HTTP context, and HTTP context is there with static SSR only. It is not there for interactive versions of Blazor with Blazor WebAssembly or Signal or Blazor server. So it is not there with those. So the main point is, with static SSR without any interactivity, we are good because all the pages are in static server rendered mode only. Yes. And for interactive pages, interactive server and interactive WebAssembly, we need to exclude these pages from the interactivity. So these should be full page reload. Okay, using that only these will be allowed to access the HTTP context, and these will be allowed to set the auth cookie. All right. Okay, so if this is going to be a statically server-side rendered page, so for this model, we are going to have this from. So we are going to post this form which we will just about to create. So that form we will post it with this. Let's first have that only. So here what I'll do, I'll simply have a div class row. Inside this I'm going to have a div class, let's say call sm5 mx auto to make it center aligned horizontally. Here I'm going to have a edit form with model, this model. Okay, inside this I'm going to have div class mb3, and then label for the first let's say username, then input text with bind value for our model.email, then class CSS class for form control, and then for validation we could simply have validation message for, and here we could set this lambda with model.email, and we are good with our first username. And same thing we are going to copy for our password, and then one more time for our checkbox for remember me, and then one more time for login button. Okay, so first is email, second would be password on this input type text. We'll set it to type password. This is HTML attribute password. And for the third one, where we are going to have our checkbox for remember me, so for this we can remove this validation message from there. For this it should be input checkbox, find value would be model dot remember me. Okay, and on class form control for checkbox we can use form check input like this. Save it, and then just have a text here remember me. All right, then last one where we are going to have our buttons. So for login button, here we can say button type submit, type equals submit. We can have a couple of classes, btn primary, btn sm. Here we'll say login. Now because this is type submit, so it is going to submit this edit form. Okay, so by default it is post, but let's add the method explicitly to post. Model and form method is post. Now we'll have on valid submit. Let's say login user sync, and here we can have this method private async task login user async. So this is on valid submit. Now how the Blazor works, we can have multiple components, and each component can have its own edit form, or maybe some component can have multiple edit forms. Okay, so if we have some model with this edit form, now because these are not interactive pages, so this page is not interactive, we can have multiple edit forms on a static SSR page. Now how this is going to work, it will actually, when we'll submit this button, it will by default going to submit this page. So whatever we have on this URL, it will simply send a post request to this URL. Now if we have multiple edit forms, so it will get confused that from where this model should bind, or maybe for this login user async, how would it know that which method needs to be called? So for that we have a special property on this edit form, that is form name. So we would explicitly tell, okay, this edit form belongs to which complex type. So whenever we submit that, it will check, okay, we are submitting this form name. So for this, we can have a private const here, private const string, let's say login form, and the name is up to you. This name can be anything, but this should be unique for a single page. So login form, we can have form name equals @login form. Now we are okay. We are saying that this form belongs to this form name, but now we need to map this model to this form name. So for this model, we have a attribute that is supply parameter from form. Inside this, we can set our form name, and this is going to be our login form. Now we have connected all the dots. Now whenever we'll hit the submit button, it will submit, post this form. It will check, okay, form name is this, login form. So it will know that, okay, this login form is bind to this model. It needs to fill out this model in the case of post, HTTP post. And after that, we know that on valid submit, so it needs to call this method. Then it will simply call this method, and inside this method we will have access to this model with actual values whatever we have provided. Okay, so now we are not having any authentication mechanism right now. When I say mechanism, maybe the database service or some external third party provider, anything for checking this username and password. So we would assume, or maybe I can add a comment, say validate model.email and model.password against your database. Okay, for this I'm assuming that, let's assume it takes task dot delay. Let's say it takes, I don't know, maybe 2 seconds. It's a lot, but let's have it. After this, we would think that, okay, we have our user ready. So logged in user. So for that, we can have that model here somewhere or anywhere. Let's have it on the uh, root only. We'll say logged in user model. Okay. We have this logged in user model. Let's create it as a record. And here we can have, let's say, int id, string name, and string email for just displaying purpose. Something like this. Okay. Now let's assume from database call we got this model. So we'll say logged in user model. So we'll say user equals, right now I'm setting the dummy values here, but what happened? ID, let's say one, name, let's say my name, and email something abcd at some email.com. Okay. Now we have this user model ready. Now we need this user model to be added or to be logged into our authentication scheme, with our authentication scheme. So for this, we are going to have access to HTTP context. We need HTTP context. So for static SSR pages, we can actually get HTTP context as a cascading parameter. So HTTP context, I have this property and I just need to mark it at cascading parameter. Now we will have this cascading parameter, HTTP context. Now we can access this. So on this HTTP context, we have a property that is sign in async. So wait, sign in async. Now this is not coming, and why this is not coming? HTTP context, sign in async. Okay, I remember what we need to do. So here, first thing we need to provide our auth scheme. Now we have our auth scheme in our program.cs, right? This is our auth scheme. So let's do this. Let's cut this from here, or maybe let's make it public. And we can't make it public because this is top level. So let's cut this out from here. Let's create a class on root. We'll say constants. Public static class constants, and here we'll make this as public. Let's have this cookie as well there with the same thing. So public. Now our constants are ready, and here we can say constants dot auth scheme. Now this constant should come from this current namespace only. Constants, and here also constants. Cool. Now on our login page here with sign in async. So first parameter we need to provide the constants dot auth scheme. Then second thing, it is not coming. Why it is not coming? I have no idea. Okay, if it's not coming, no problem. So with this second parameter, we need to provide a claims principal. For that, we need to create a claims principal. And for claims principal, we need to have a claims identity. And for claims identity, we can have our user claims. So when we say claims, we could get all these from this logged in user model. Inside this only, let's create a helper method. So here we'll say public and claim array. Here we'll say two claims. We are actually transforming it to claims. Okay. And here we can have simply an array. And here we can have new claim. We can add type and value. So type, we could have claim types dot name identifier. All these are up to you. For this, I'm going to use id dot toString, and I'm going to copy it 2 times. So then again for name, we can have just name without toString because name is already in string. So whatever claims you need, you will add all those claims here. So with email, I'll say email. And now this method is ready to claims. Now here we can simply say var claims equals logged in user. What is the name? User model, or let's call it just user. User dot to claims. Now we have our claims ready. Now we need identity. Here we'll say new claims identity. Claims identity from system security claims. Here if we see, we have a bunch of overload methods. One where we can provide direct claims, we can provide identity and claim, we can provide claims and authentication type. Let's use this one. So claims, enumerable of claims. For this we have this claims. Then authentication type. Here we know that constants dot auth scheme. This is the type which we are using. Now our claims identity is ready. Identity. Now we need to just create our claims principal. Var principal equals new claims principal, and in this we can provide our I identity, which is a claims identity. So identity. Now our principal is ready. For this we can provide this principal here, and we should be good now. It is saying HTTP context does not contain a definition for sign in async. Am I missing something? Maybe because I need to exclude it. Maybe close Visual Studio and open it again. Let me try that. I closed Visual Studio, open it again, and still I can see this. Looks like I'm missing something. Oh, Microsoft ASP.NET Core authentication. We need to have this using statement, but maybe it was not coming uh, in the previous run, right? Okay, okay, we are good. Sign in async. So our sign in async method is ready. Now it will actually add this principal to HTTP context, and we have in our program.cs we have added this add authentication with this cookies. It will actually add all these information in the cookie. From there we can get. Now it also has one more overload method with authentication properties. We can use this as well because we in our model we had this remember me. We can use this thing as well. Here we could say var auth properties equals new authentication properties, and it has bunch of these things. So most commonly used are, I guess, redirect URI and is persistent. Let's use is persistent. For this, we can say model dot remember me, and we can pass this as a third parameter auth properties. Now we are good with our login user async method. This is saying this is not nullable, so let's provide a default value with this. All right. So now our login method is ready. Now let's see what was the URL we have provided in our program.cs for login. The login path is /auth/login. Let's copy this. Go to our login page. And here we'll say @page and we'll add this auth login. So it should come to this page, login page. Save everything. And now we should be good. Now how would we check it? For this, what we need to do on root of our components. So if you go to component app.razor, this is the main HTML entry point. Inside this we have this routes. So for this routes here, we need to have this as a child of cascading authentication state. This one. Now with .NET 8 we have one more option for this. Instead of having this here, you have one more option, and that option is you can go to program.cs, and here you could say builder.services.add cascading authentication state. So these two are same. So either you can have this thing, if you check it, adds cascading authentication state to the service collection. This is equivalent to having a cascading authentication state component at the root of your component hierarchy. So if you are adding this in program.cs, you can remove this thing. If you are not having it, you want to have it in here in your routes.razor, then you can remove this line. So one is enough. So let's do this. Let's have it in program.cs only, and we can remove this from this component hierarchy. All right. Now for authentication authorization, inside this router we have router, then we have found, then we have this route view. Instead of route view, for this we are going to have authorized route view. Let's move this thing to using here. Using. So we are going to have this authorized route view. Now it will enable the routing for us. Not routing, authorization in Razor components. All right. Now how would we check it? Let's quickly go to our pages, and here we have counter, we have home, we have weather. Let's add one more Razor page. So I'll say Razor component. Here I'll say, I don't know, maybe profile. And on this one, I'll say first page, I'll say profile. And then I'm going to add an attribute here, authorize, which should come from using Microsoft. Okay, the IntelliSense is not working for this. Using Microsoft dot ASP.NET Core dot authorization. Spelling is correct, right? Save it. And now we should see this page only when we are authorized. Now how would we know if we are on this page or not? So for that, what we can do, we can simply have a authorized view here. We need to access it at multiple places, right? So let's do this. Let's add it to the imports.razor. Cut it @imports_imports.razor. So we'll say using Microsoft ASP.NET Core Components authorization. Now we should have this authorized view. Remove this profile page and open it again so that it may pick up this time. Okay, very good. Authorized view. Inside authorized view, we are going to have three things: authorized, authorizing and not authorized. So we know we have added this authorized attribute to this, so we only care about this authorized version of this. So in this authorized, now here we can say, let's say h1, we could say hello and then username. And now that name, inside this we have access to a context variable. On this context we can have our user. Let's do this. I'm going to unload this project and then reload. For new components, when we add any new component to this Blazor, so sometimes Visual Studio just does not recognize it completely. So it is again not recognizing it. So let me close the Visual Studio and open it again. And now we can see this. Okay. So context dot user dot, we have all these things. So on this we have these claims, and now from these claims we can access all the claims which we have added in our login page. So if we check our login page, login, here we have added all these claims, user.to claims. If we go here, we have added these three claims. So we need this name. Okay, claim types.name, we can access this. So if we go to this context user.claims, from here we can simply find or get first or default c.type equals we can say claim types.name dot value dot value. Let's add using for this claim types, and now we are good. We should see this authorize. All right, this slash profile. Now let's do this. Let's add this slash profile to our nav menu. I'm going to copy the last one. I'll say profile and profile. Save it. Let's try to run it. We have typed a lot. Let's see if everything is working. So it looks like it is here. We have some error. It says the path in value must start with a slash, which we missed. We added with auth. This access denied. Let's add slash. Start, run it again. And we have this. Home is working. Weather is working. Counter is working. Go back to home. If we inspect, if we go to the application, here if we go to cookies, right now we just have this anti-forgery token and we don't have anything else here. All right, now let's try to go to profile. So this is saying slash profile error 404. And why this slash profile, right? Pages profile slash profile. Yes, this is correct. We run it again. What is it? 7190 counter weather profile. I have no idea why this is saying like this. Strange. So do you guys know what is happening here? Why this is showing error 404 with the slash profile? If you guys know, do let me know in the comment. Let me see. I might be making some silly mistake. Let me try to check. Okay, so looks like it is a problem with Visual Studio. I tried to create a new page and it was also not working. I tried on this profile page, I tried to change this URL, but still it didn't work. Finally, I figured out the problem is if we right click on these new pages which we are adding, if we check the properties, for these build action says none. But for the existing pages, if we check, the build action is content. It should be content. Somehow, sometimes it does not work. So for this test and for this profile, so now there is no need of this test. Let's remove this. And for this profile, we'll simply go to properties and change this build action to content. If you are facing this error, then you can try this thing. Save everything, and on nav menu, I have added the test as well when I was testing it. Remove this and let's run it. Okay, now let's go to profile, and you see with profile I clicked on profile, but it went to this URL /auth/login question mark return URL equals /profile. And now it moved to this username. When we pressed submit, it went to this, and there is, didn't I add validation there? Oh, okay. I didn't add data annotation validator. I clicked on that login button. It went ahead and it logged in this user. Now we can access profile. It says profile hello Abhay. That means it is able to get this value from claims. Now if we right click, I'll set that validation, but first we'll check if everything is working. If we go to application, here you see we have this cookie app auth which we just created, and this is a encrypted string which has all the claims and all that identity information. This is HTTP only, this is secure, this is strict same site, and all that configuration whatever we set, it is here. Now we don't have any login mechanism yet. Now if I try to refresh it, if I go to profile, it will be able to come here because now we have this cookie. Now let's try to delete this cookie. Now if I refresh it, it would go back to the profile page. Alright, so first thing, let's do this. Let's go to our login page and add the data annotation validator inside edit form. Data annotation validator. After that, for this input form check, we had this remember me with that username. Let's remove that username hardcode string. Then I guess we are good. Now let's do one more thing. On this nav menu as well, let's display our username somewhere. Or maybe we'll display login and logout links here. Profile is fine. Here we'll simply add one more. Inside this save nav item px3, we will check. So we will add an authorized view here. Here we'll say if user is not authorized, then we'll display this nav link with auth/login, and we'll name it login, because if user is not authorized, it should go to login. If user is authorized, then inside this authorized view we can have authorized, and in here we can have one more link that should go to logout. So auth/logout. Save it. Save everything. Now on logout we don't have anything yet. Let's first change this thing. So page auth/logout. This is the thing which we have added in our program.cs for logout path. Yes, /auth/logout /auth/logout. Now here let's have simple string. It should not display anything, but let's say logging out ... Now inside this, what we'll do, first we need to have access to our HTTP context cascading property, this cascading parameter. So we'll add that cascading parameter here. Now inside this, override on initialized async. Here we would simply say await HTTP context dot sign out async. And the sign out async, we can have this, or we can have an overload where we can provide authentication properties or scheme. So we'll add our authentication scheme, the one which we used with login. So with login we have used, you remember, with sign in async we used constant.auth scheme. So we are going to use the same when we are logging out. Constants.auth scheme, and now we are good. After logging out, we can redirect this user somewhere. So let's inject our navigation manager. Inject navigation manager. Navigation manager. Oh, did I did something wrong? Where is that code? Yes. Okay, so inject navigation manager. Then after logging out, we would simply say navigation manager dot navigate to slash, and we can remove this logout page from the string. So here we can say replace true. Save it. Let's try to run it. Now if we see, we have login button, user is not logged in. If we click on login, we are on login page. If we say this thing, it will not allow us. Let's add anything because we don't have proper database logic. Press login. Email field is not a valid email address. Let's make it a valid email address. Login. It is loading. And we are still on this login page only without anything. If we check here, application, we have this cookie. And that's because we are still on this login page, because on this login page, after logging in, we didn't redirect user to anywhere. So let's do this. Here we can say inject navigation manager. And if you remember, if we directly access the profile page, it uses that return URL. We can have parameter here of type string, null label string, return URL. And this should be supply parameter from query. Okay, if we have it, it will add this. If we don't have it, then we are good. So for this, we can have a default value of slash, which is homepage. Then we have this sign in async, and here we can say navigation manager dot navigate to and return URL. Save it. If this is null, this is null, right? So let's remove this null label because now we can have this default value. We have this default value. Run it. Now if we see, we have logout. If we press logout, you see something happened there. We have this login and it came back to directly home page. Let's do this. Let's go to profile page. We can't because this is right now authorized page and we are not logged in. We have this login thing. Let's add. Now if you press login, it should go to profile page. Yes, profile page. Let's log out. Login again. This time it should go to home page. Because after logging in, now it will work. Our navigation manager will work, and now we are on home page. So this is how we can implement this login logout. Let's check one more thing. Let's go to weather page. Now weather is not coming. Something happened with weather. We'll see. Counter. We can see the count. Oh, for weather. When I was trying to see that thing for weather, I changed this weather one. Okay. Remove this. Save everything. Let's run it again. Okay. Counter. Logout. Counter. Try this thing. Login. We are good. Login. It is loading. We are on home page. And everything is working as it was working before. So we can move around from here and there and everything works just fine. Okay. Alright. So this is how you can do this login, logout, auth with Blazor Web App and Blazor Web App with interactive server. Alright. Let's try to access this state on our interactive page. So we have this counter page, which is actually interactive server. If you see here also, let's try to access the username. So we can simply go to our profile page and we can copy this section. authorize view. Let's add it here. What happened? Claim types, and we are good. And if user is not authorized, then also we can say not authorized. Here we can say h1 unknown user. We could say something like this. So save everything. Let's try to run it on counter page. All right. Now let's check for interactive WebAssembly and interactive auto. Okay. So for that, I'm going to create a new project inside the same solution. I'll say add new project, Blazor Web App. And this time we'll say Blazor Auth No Identity dot, let's say interactive, or let's say just dot WASM. Authentication type none, because we are not using identity with individual accounts. It will add identity support. Then interactive render mode. So it will be same for WebAssembly and auto. I'm using WebAssembly, but you can do the same thing with auto as well. Let's create. All right. Now in this, if we see, we have two projects. First one is Blazor Auth Identity.wasm, then .wasm.client. So this .wasm, this is server project. This .client, this is WebAssembly project, which is going to be directly in the client, in the browser, the actual WebAssembly. Okay, so this first one is server. So inside this server, we are going to do the same thing what we have done for Blazor Auth No Identity for the main project. Okay, so we'll do the same thing. First, we need to have logged in user model. Let's copy this thing. We'll move it to this. So inside this, the dependency is this wasm.client. This is registered as a dependency in wasm. So if we go to this thing projects, we can see this. So whatever types or anything we can have, we want to have in both, we can add those in client project. Now that should not be the hence sensitive information. We should not add in the client project, but this is just a type, so we are okay. So logged in user model, I just added it. The namespace is Blazor Auth No Identity dot wasm dot client. Let's add the correct namespace. Now next thing we have done in our main project was these constants. Let's copy these constants as well. Now this constants, we will not need this in client project, so we'll just add it to the main wasm project. So here copy and paste, change the namespace dot wasm. All right. After that, in program.cs, we have added this add authentication, add cookie, these two things. So let's copy this thing, go to the main wasm project, wasm server project. So program.cs, I'm adding these here. Let's add the namespace for these constants. Then we have added this add authentication and add authorization. So let's go to the WASM server project again, and in the this section after static files, let's add this, save everything, and now we should be good. Now let's copy the login page. So we'll go to the components, auth. Let's maybe copy the complete auth folder. So I'm copying it, go to the WASM project, and I'm going to add in this components, in this pages, I'm adding it, this auth, and we have these three: access denied, login, and logout. Okay, login, everything is fine, looks like everything is fine. Okay, save everything. Now we should be good, but before that, let's go to this layout, main layout, nav menu, and here let's do the same thing what we have done in our main project. So let's go to components, nav menu, and copy these three things: profile, authorize view, this auth login, logout. These things we are adding it here. Authorize view, we need to add a namespace. So this namespace Microsoft ASP.NET Core Components authorization. Let's cut this and move it to the underscore imports.razor. The next thing, add cascading authentication state. In program.cs, let's add builder.services.add cascading authentication state, and we are good. Save it. Now we need one profile page, so let's copy the profile page from the main project, copy it and add it to the pages folder directly with that slash profile, and now we should be good. Now let's try it out. Let me do this. Let me close all tabs, select the WASM project and run it. We'll see if the basic setup works. We have just copied all the things from the previous project. That there is some error. System invalid operation exception, unable to find the required services. Please add all the required services by calling iService collection dot add authorization in the application startup code. What happened? We have added the use authorization. Am I missing something? Component WebAssembly server. The error was unable to find the required service. Please add all the required service by calling the service collection dot add authorization. And we need to add, because we are using interactive versions, add authentication. After this we could say add authorization, not on this, builder dot services dot add authorization, not authentication. Authentication we already added. Authorization. Save it, run it. Okay, we are here. It says something. It is saying invalid operation exception, no service of type authentication state provider has been registered. Okay, now with this interactive version we need to register this authentication state provider somewhere in our app, because right now it is not interactive server, it is not fully SSR. It is an interactive version with WebAssembly or auto. So for this we need to have one implementation of authentication state provider. Okay, we'll provide it. So what we can do in this only, maybe let's create a file here, plus let's say this is server version, right? Server auth state provider, and this should be an implementation of authentication state provider. Now because we are in server, we have one more version of this authentication state provider. Okay, so that is server authentication state provider, which already have something. So server authentication state provider from Microsoft ASP.NET Core Components server. So we can do this. So the default, if you see, if I remove this server, you will see it is showing this error, because this authentication state provider, this is an abstract class which has this get authentication state async method and notify authentication state change. But for this one, this is protected void, we are okay, but this is abstract, so we need to provide body for this get authentication state async. So right now we are in server, so instead of providing our own body, we can use server authentication state provider. So this is a built-in class which will provide the default implementation using the task of authentication state and all these things. It will provide the default implementation for this. Using this, we should be good for default implementation. Okay. Now let's register this thing. This server auth state provider. This is the one, right? Let's go to program.cs. Here we'll say builder.services.add scoped. Here we'll say for authentication state provider, authentication state provider, use server auth state provider. Okay, let's try to run it now. And now we can see the app is here with profile, login, logout, counter, all these buttons. Counter, this is not working. Now it will work because now WebAssembly has loaded. We are on weather, profile, it went to login. This is the expected behavior. Do this @gmail.com. Login. It is logging in. And we can see the profile page with the correct name and logout button. Let's refresh the page. You see, I'm refreshing it, but still I can see this thing. Right click, check the cookies, application, cookies. Am I not looking at the correct thing? Yeah, cookies. Cookies AP auth. We have this cookie here. Okay. So looks like this is working. If you log out, it is logged out right now. We can see the login button again. So everything still works. Now, right now I'm trying to access this profile page or this name on this server project. Now let's go to the client project, the wasm.client, which is actually completely client project. In this we have this counter page. Here only let's create one more page. Add razor component. We'll say wasm client profile page, something like this. And let's have some URL. So page slash, let's say, wasm client profile, something like this. And on this also I'm going to add an attribute, authorize attribute. Okay, and here again I'll try to access the same name. So let's copy this from our server project, pages, profile, and this authorize view. And here also we need to add the authorization view, authorized. We need to add first, let's add claim types using this. And for this also let's right click, check the properties, build action is content, which is fine. Now for this authorized view and authorized, let's add the namespace. What was that namespace? It was in server project. If you go to underscore imports, we have this Microsoft ASP.NET Core Components authorization. We can add this in the clients underscore imports.razor as well. Save it. And this component dot authorization, this is not here. So with WebAssembly project, with client projects, the authentication is not enabled by default. So for this, what we need to do, if we check right now, we just have one package, Microsoft ASP.NET Core Components WebAssembly. We need to install a package. Manage NuGet packages. The package name is WebAssembly Authentication. WebAssembly.authentication. It should be Microsoft ASP.NET Core Component. Microsoft ASP.NET Core Components WebAssembly Authentication. This. Okay, .NET 8. We are good. Let's install it. Install. Build client-side authentication for single-page applications. Pass. Apply. I accept. Cool. Now if we go, we should have this namespace. Now we should be able to use this. All right. Now with this, there is one missing piece. The way we have enabled authentication authorization for server project, the same way we need to do something with this client project as well. So in client also we have a program.cs file, right? In this program.cs file, we need to have our builder.services.add authorization core. This is the bare minimum package for enable authorization in the client WASM project. And with this also we need to add builder.services.add authentication, add cascading authentication state. The same way we have added it in our server project. Now let's try to run it. And we didn't add the link to the profile from WASM, right? Let's copy this WASM client profile. Let's go to our nav menu, and here after everything, or maybe before this, here we'll say this profile, WASM client profile, and here we'll say WASM, and the top profile we'll say server, to distinguish between these two. Let's run it now. All right, now if you see, the counter would work. No, it is not working. We have some error. Reload. First let's reload, we'll see the error. But right now if I refresh again, I have the same error. Let's try to see what is the error. If you go to console, it is saying something. It says Microsoft ASP.NET Core components.authorization authentication state provider has been registered. Oh sorry, no service of type this has been registered. So there is no service which is registering this. That means there is no implementation of authentication state provider, and this is coming from our client project. So right now if I go to the home page and if I refresh this, it will work because home page is on server side. Weather will work, server profile will work, but WASM profile won't work. Right now it went to this login page. If I select everything, if I go to login, we are on WASM profile, right? Server profile, WASM profile, and counter. And when we try to access the profile, then we have this error. So the way we have registered an implementation of that authentication state provider in server, the same way we will add this in our client. Before that, the WASM server page was working, right? That's because we didn't add the render mode to this. If we check on counter, it should have been render mode interactive WebAssembly. Same thing we need to add on WASM client profile. Let's add the render mode interactive WebAssembly. Now it will also not work. It was considering it as statically server side rendered. That's why it was working. Okay, WASM profile. It went to this login, this thing, login. And we have this error. Once WebAssembly comes in, we have the same error. Let's try to add a implementation of authentication state provider. So there we had server auth state provider. Inside this, let's have in client project, we'll say client auth state provider. This name is up to you. The only thing is it should be a subclass of authentication state provider. This is the only requirement. And now with this, we need to implement this abstract class. Get authentication state async. All right, now for this authentication state async, we need to provide the authentication state, this task of authentication state. Now how would we know if the user is logged in or not? We need to provide that information in this method. Now, because this is running inside WebAssembly on the client, we don't have access to HTTP context, so that we cannot directly check on the HTTP context.user or request identity claims. We cannot have all those things. Now we have this challenge, we have this problem. So we need a way by which we can somehow pass this authentication information from the server to our client. Okay, so that authentication state, actually, what is the user logged in or not? If user is logged in, what all are claims which we have with that user identity? All these things we need to provide from server to client. And when we want to provide some data from server to client in Blazor, we can use persistent component state. Okay, this is a class and this is a component. We can use this. What we'll do, we'll use this to register the data. So how this works, when the initially it runs on server, it has its own state, then it when it goes to the client, it renders on the client. We have a mechanism using persistent component state. We can serialize some data on the server, then that data, this persistent component state, that gets passed from server to client, and then on client we can access that state, persistent component state, and we can get data, fetch data from that. That thing we will do now. All right, so for this, first we'll go to server auth state provider. Here let's create a constructor, and inside this constructor let's inject persistent component state. Persistent component state. Okay, let's call it state only. This name is up to you. Okay, or maybe let's rename it to, yeah, let's rename it to component state, something like this. Component state, component state. All right, now on this persistent component state, we have two methods, persist as JSON and try take from JSON. So persist as JSON, we'll add this method in this server, because this is for persisting. This will serialize the current auth state and save it with this, and then we will inject the same persistent component state in the client project, and there we will use try take from JSON to fetch it. Okay, so now here if we want to save the authentication state, we need to have authentication state somewhere in here. Okay, so let's do that. So here we'll say private task of authentication state. Let's say authentication state. Okay, now we need to provide this. We need to have value for this. So for this, what we can do, it will be provided from, we could say, from the server authentication state provider. Here if you see, we have this underscore authentication state task. Okay, set authentication state task, and there we have this notify authentication state changed. And what this does, this actually, if you go to navigate to definition, it comes here. So in the main base, which is this authentication state provider, in this we have this authentication state changed, this event. So we can use this event, we can hook our event handler, we can check when this authentication state provider changed event is triggered, and then we will have that authentication state task that we can have in our this underscore authentication task. Okay, so in this constructor, what we'll do, we'll say authentication state changed plus equals this server auth state provider underscore authentication state change, this method. Here if we check, we have this as a parameter, this task. So we can use this task, we can assign our underscore authentication state to with this task. So because this is a single line, so I'll use this expression body method and I'll do this underscore authentication state equals task. Now we have our underscore authentication state ready. Okay. Now we will use this to serialize to pass it to component state. Okay. Now on this component state, as I said earlier, we have two methods and we have one more method, that is register on persisting. So this is a registers a callback to persist the component state when the application is about to be paused. That means when the application is switching the render modes from server to client, when it is going there, then it will hold here. It will call this method, whatever we are providing inside this, then it will continue on the client. Okay. So component state dot register on persisting. In this, we can provide a callback. Then we can provide render mode. So for callback, if you see func of task, so this callback should return a task. That's the only requirement. Okay. So for this, let's create a method here. We'll say private. Let's say name is up to us. Persist component state async, something like this. Component, this name is up to you, you can name it whatever you want. Now it should return task, so it should be task private task, and then this, if we are using it as async, so we can also add async and then we can provide body to this. Here we'll simply call this or provide this. Then the second is render mode. So we are using interactive WebAssembly, right? So we'll use render mode Microsoft ASP.NET Core Components Web dot interactive WebAssembly. There is one more render mode from MVC. We don't need that. Now if you are using interactive auto, then you need to set interactive auto here. So that's the only change in interactive WebAssembly and interactive auto. All right. Now in this method, we'll provide body for this. So here we can have auth state equals await underscore authentication state, or maybe let's do this. This is a task, right? So let's rename it underscore authentication state task. All right, component state, component state. Let's use this underscore component state only. Here both will be same, but let's use this underscore only. All right, save it. Now here in persist component state async, we have auth state ready. Okay. Now here we'll say if auth state dot user dot identity dot is authenticated. If this is authenticated, then only we need to pass down the component state, right? Because that is what we are doing here. We are just passing down the authentication state data. So we just need to check it, and it could be null at any place. So let's have the null checks. We'll say authState.user identity question mark dot is authenticated equals true. If this is true, then only pass down the data. Okay. Now how can we get the data from this auth state user? So if we see, this user is claims principal, and on this claims principal, if we check auth state dot user dot claims, we can access claims, which is an enumerable of claims. So this is the thing which we have in our logged in user model. From here we have added these three claims. Okay. So we can access the claims from here one by one using this, or maybe we can have a factory method in this logged in user model. So I'll create this public static logged in user model, and here I'll say from principal. Okay, and here we can provide our claims principal like this. Okay, and now here we can get our claims using principal.claims, and then from these claims we can use the same thing using this. So here we'll say var user id equals claims dot first or default, or let's say first. If we are sure that it will be called only from there and it is already authenticated, we always have value, then use first, or you can use first or default. Or if you are not sure, maybe you can just try it here, if claims dot any or length or all these things you can try. So here I'll say var user id equals claims, or let's directly use principal.claims. Principal.claims.first.default. Here we'll say c.type equals claim types dot name identifier. This is what we are using for id. Okay, and id is integer int. So we have this. From this we can say dot value. Now we have user id string, but we need integer version of this. Okay, so let's use first here. We are not using first or default. We can remove this. Now we are sure. If you are not sure, then you should have the first or default and that question mark, all the checks, all those checks. Here I'll say convert dot to int 32 and just add this. Now my user id is ready. Now second thing, we need username. So name, we'll say principal.claims.first, claim types.name identifier, not name identifier. This time we are going to use name from this. Now maybe if it could be null, you could use first or default here, and the same thing actually, the question mark dot value, all these things. Now let's copy it one more time, this time for email. Dot type email. Now our claims ready. Now from here we can say return new logged in user model, user id, name and email. Now our factory method is ready from principal. Logged in sorry, user model from principal. All right, now let's go back to our server auth state provider. Here we have these claims. So instead of getting these one by one, here we could say just logged in user model dot from principal auth state dot user. Okay, now we will have logged in user model here. Logged in user, we have it here. All right, now we can do what on this component state, or underscore component state dot persist as JSON. Here if we see, we need to provide key and value. Key should be string, so let's go to our constants. Now this constant, this key, we are going to use it here and inside client as well. So better to use it in, or maybe in logged in user model only. Okay, but let's do this. Let's use name of logged in user model and then the value. So the value would be this logged in user. And now we are good. We have just set this data serialized format in persisted JSON with component state. Okay, now we are good with the server side setup. We will enhance this, but functionality wise it will work, but we will make it more. There is a memory leak and all those issues, we'll fix those later, but right now let's see if we can get this data on the client. All right. Now let's go to client auth state provider. Here, let's create a constructor. Oh, sorry, I'm creating it inside this constructor. So here also we'll inject persistent component state. Okay, we have this underscore component state. Now, okay, and we all need to have our authentication state task as well. Okay, so the same thing what we had in server auth state provider. So let's copy this private task underscore authentication state task as well. Save it. Now inside this constructor, we have underscore component state ready here, or maybe we don't need to have it in a separate thing. We are not going to use it further. So we are okay with direct injection and then we are good. So from this component state dot, we have this try take from JSON method. The type we are expecting is logged in user model. Inside this, we need to provide key. The key, it should be same what we used on server. On server is this name of logged in user model. So in here also we are going to use name of logged in user model. Okay. Now try take from JSON. This is try pattern. So it will provide out logged in user model and then instance. So we'll say out were logged in user. Okay. If this is true, we are good. If this is not, we'll do something different. So here we'll say if this is true and one additional check, we'll check this logged in user is not null. And you can add other checks as well. For example, let's say this logged in user dot id it is greater than 0, or whatever additional checks you want to have, you can have there. Okay, if both of these things satisfies, that means we have this state and this state is valid, then we can generate our authentication state task. Okay, so now what is this authentication state task? If you go to this authentication state, here we can use claims principle as a constructor parameter to this. And if we go to claims principle, here we can check, we can have a identity as a claims, the constructor parameter. So all these things we'll do here. First thing, now we have this logged in user model. So we need to get our claims. So our claims, we know how to get those. This is simple. We know logged in user dot to claims. We have this method already. So now we have this. Now from this, we need to generate our identity. So we'll say var identity equals the same thing what we have done for login. Let's go to login. We can copy it from there. So login. If we go here, we have claims, we have identity, we have principal. These three things, let's copy. Come here and we should be good. The only thing is this should be logged in user. And this auth scheme here, we don't need to provide it because on this client side, the only thing what this authentication state does, it does not authenticate it against anything. It does not authenticate. It just displays the data. That's all this does. Okay, this does not validate anything. The validation part that is handled by server only from using that cookie which we are already using. Okay, so now we have principal. From this principal we can generate our authentication state. Here we'll say var auth state equals new authentication state, and we'll provide this principal as a parameter to it, constructor parameter. Now our auth state is ready. Okay, now here after this we could simply say underscore authentication state task equals task dot from result dot state. Now we are good. Now what if this was not here? That means this if was not satisfied, it is false. In else case, we need to handle the default case. In default case, we can have default empty identity for this. Here we'll say with this underscore authentication state task equals this auth state, which should be an empty auth state. So here we'll say var auth state equals all that these empty things. Okay, let's copy all these claims. Let's not get it. Identity default without any parameter. Principal this identity authentication state with this principal, and we are good. We are setting this default identity in this case. Okay. Now, okay, we can do this. Have this claims principal here, and then just set this inside both of these. And then because these two lines are common, have these after this if else. And now we are good. Now we need to provide body to this get authentication state async. This should provide task of authentication state, which we have this underscore authentication state task. We can directly return this thing from. Now our client side authentication state provider is all ready. Okay, now we can make it read only because this is just being used from constructor, so we can make it read only as well. Save it. Now we should be good. Let's quickly try it. Microsoft Visual Basic, we don't need this. Save it. Let's quickly try out if it works. And there is some error. Let's see what is it. Syntax error, missing something. Double, it should be triple one more. No. First dot value, it should be only one. Run it. Okay, we are on home page. Then let's go to weather. Let's go to profile. This is all server side right now. Let's have the authenticate state. Login. Home page. So server profile. We have this home page. Again, it is working. We have logout button. Now let's go to counter. There's still some error. Let's see what is it is. It is saying no service for type this has been registered. Didn't we register this? I guess no. So in the main client project in program.cs, we didn't register it. Let's register builder.services.add. Here we can have it as scoped or singleton. For WebAssembly client, singleton and scoped are same because there is only one scope and that is also singleton. So it's up to you how you do this. But to be consistent, we can use the same add scoped only. So we need to register authentication state provider with our client auth state provider. Okay, run it. Now we are already logged in. We'll see both the cases. Right now we are not logged in. Okay, home, we are okay. Weather, we are okay. Server profile, let's log in. We are on server profile, home, weather, all this server. Now let's go to client. We are on counter. We'll wait for it. No error. We'll try to access this. We are able to do this. Now let's check WASM profile. If I click on it, we can see WASM client profile. I didn't add name here. WASM client profile. We have this logout. We can log out. Now if we go to WASM profile, it is here. We'll see if why the name is not coming. Login. and we are on WASM profile. Now we can have this. Okay, it was the here, and after the hydration, after the that switches, then we don't have it. It went from there. So that means somehow the our state is not working. Let's check what the issue is by putting breakpoints, of course. So client auth state provider, let's put a breakpoint here, and let's put a breakpoint here. So we are these breakpoints are going to get hit a lot of times. We'll see. From the server side, server auth state provider, let's put breakpoint in this method. Okay, let's stop and try to run it again. Persist component state async. Continue. Okay, now let's try to log in. It is still loading. What happened? Run. Continue. Something is not right. Something is not right. Maybe with this subscription, let's try to complete this page, this server auth state provider. So you remember talked about that memory leak. So let's first try to fix that. Maybe that's the issue. I'm not sure what the issue is right now. So this method register on persisting. If we check it, returns persisting component state subscription. It returns this delegate. If we check it, this struct, sorry, delegate persisting component state subscription. So from here we can call dispose to dispose or remove the callbacks. So what we can do, we can store its uh, return value in that persisting component state subscription. So here we'll say private read only persisting component state subscription underscore subscription. Okay, then we'll set this underscore subscription to this. All right, now when this is getting disposed, so we can simply implement I disposable, and we can have public void dispose. Inside this we can say underscore subscription dot dispose. So just return the dispose the subscription, and remove this as well, this event handler on authentication state changed. So authentication state changed minus equal, save everything. Let's try to run it. We are here on home page to work. If I put the breakpoint again, run it. Breakpoint, continue. There is some problem with breakpoint. I have no idea why it is happening. If you guys have any idea about it, please do let me in the comment. I'll simply stop it and I'll do this. I'll come here on this. I'll add this breakpoint here. Let's try to run it now. Alright, we are on home. Let's try to log in. Log in. Now it came here. Continue. Now it got set to this. Now if we go to WASM profile, it again came here. This time we check, we have logged in user ID, name and email. If we continue, we are good. And now it came to the client auth state provider. All right. Here, if we continue further, it went to this component state. Claims, it should have 3 claims. Yes, it has. Name identifier, name and email, correct values, identity, principal, then auth state. We have correct auth state here. Then we are assigning it. Now we should be good. Debugger, it is taking long time. This new promise resolve, something is not right. This error is coming from some dynamic script. What the issue is, what the error is. Can't see the error. Authenticate state task which has the value. Continue. We can't see. Maybe with that error, there is some error. We check in console. Hmm. Authorization failed. These requirements were not met. Deny anonymous authorization requirement requires an authenticated user. We have authenticated user, right? Let's try to go to the WASM profile again. Still same thing. Let me try to debug this. Let me see what is the issue here. Maybe when we are awaiting on it, where is it? In client, I have this breakpoint here, right? Let's do this. Let's follow what with the identity it by default does. So this default auth state, this thing with this private read-only task authentication state here, we'll add a default state. So it should be this task dot from result new claims principal new authentication state new claims principal new claims identity. All these defaults. This is the same thing what we are having here. Save it. I'm not sure what is happening right now. I'm just trying to see. Maybe because this variable was null and maybe this no, unless this constructor is not completed, it should not come here. Let's try. Run. I don't know if it is going to make any difference. We are here. Let's try to disable all the breakpoints. Debug. Disable all breakpoints. Open console. And maybe not open console and just go to one profile. Login. Hello, Abhay. This is on client server, then it removes. Okay, let me try to see why this is happening. There might be some small thing which I am missing here. Do let me know in the comment if you guys know about it. I'll debug and let me debug. Oh my god. Okay. So this was just this problem with claims identity. I didn't provide the authentication type. Authentication type. Ideally, it should be the same. Not this is not hard and fast rule right now, but because these are two different instances of authentication state on client and server, so we can have any random string or anything if we want. But It's good if you are using the same for both. So let's do this. This constant, let's move this constant to the client project. Okay, remove from server project. In the client, let's modify the namespace, and then in this client auth state provider with this identity, let's use the same thing. So here we'll say constants dot auth skill, and in server login page we have constant dot auth scheme, which is fine. Save everything. Now let's try to run it. There is some error. Constants. Run. Do let me in the comment if you guys were able to figure out this small detail. Okay, now let's go to WASM profile. Provide values to login, username and password. Login. We have this, and this is not going away. And in console also there is no error. Now we can see this. We have logout. Let's go to counter. Do this thing. Go back to server WASM profile. We have this name. Server profile. We have this name here as well. That means we have our state across the application. Either these are statically server-side rendered pages or interactive server or interactive WebAssembly auto, anything. It is always there. One profile, let's say logout, and it logged out and we are on home page again. Go to WASM profile again. It will ask us for login. And statically server-side rendered page are also working as expected as before. All right. So this is how we can implement custom authentication and authorization, of course, with the new Blazor without using identity, without using ASP.NET Core Identity. All right. So I guess that's all for this video. Please do let me know in the comment if you guys learned something new. Okay, I was trying it for the first time and we got so many errors, and concept wise the concept is same. You can enhance this with some other claim types and all other things, whatever you want to do with this. You can enhance this complete thing. The base core auth is like this only. This is the base. All right. Now this was really completely related to Blazor Web App. Now we have one more flavor of Blazor, that is Blazor standalone WebAssembly apps. So for that, implementing custom authentication with the standalone Blazor WebAssembly apps, I already have a video on my channel. I would recommend you guys to check that video out. I'm going to drop the link of that video in the description box as well. So youtube.com/prince. If you go to videos, it should be this one, custom authentication Blazor WASM standalone app. So this is how we can do this in a standalone WebAssembly app. And this current video which you are watching, in this we have implemented it with Blazor Web App with all the interactive modes and without interactive. All right. So yeah, that's all for this video. Please like this video, share this video, subscribe my channel. I'll be back soon with some other cool video. Till then, bye bye. Happy coding.